Hello guys, we are back in new fanfic, and if enjoying this then please share and like part 2. Now let's start the fanfic. After the rather embarrassing start of his morning, Anko had guided Hinata and Mito out of the house wearing blindfolds. Once the girls were gone, Yugao quizzed him on his backstory, while they waited for Anko to return. The two women then donned their Anbu masks before the three of them headed for the stadium. It didn't take long to reach it, not at the speed they moved, but it was enough time for Naruto to get a little nervous. Sure, he was an extremely powerful shinobi, but that didn't mean he couldn't worry about what was about to happen. "Way here," stated Anko, as the three of them leapt to the top of the stadium and then down to the center of field. Looking around, Naruto had to laugh, if only a little bit. Standing around him was a gathering of old and new faces. Of course Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Makoto was there, but so was Hiashi Hyuga. The stern-looking Hyuga looked exactly the same as the last time Naruto saw the man in his world, the only difference being he looked slightly friendlier, though not much. Rather than the modified clothing he had seen everyone else wearing, Hiashi wore the traditional Hyuga clan robes, stiff and proper down to the last stitch. In front of Tsunade and her advisors stood an assortment of shinobi that Naruto instantly recognized, except for one. From right to left they had Konohamaru Saratobi, then a pink-haired boy he didn't recognize, and followed by Itachi Uchiha who waved at him. Next there was Guy Maeda and Kakashi Hatake. Guy looked far too excited to be there while Kakashi had his nose buried in his infamous orange book. For the most part the entire group was dressed in light black linen uniforms, probably their official uniforms for out-of-village missions, except for Guy. Guy wore a modified version of his green spandex jumpsuit, this one missing the sleeves and having a zipper on the front that was opened down to his collarbones. Other than that, he looked exactly the same. Naruto Uzumaki called Tsunade, getting everyone's attention. "We are here today to test you for suitability to join this village. You will go through the standard testing for new shinobi, and depending on whether or not you can complete each portion will determine your rank afterwards. Do you understand?" "Yes, Hokage-sama," responded Naruto, though he had to force himself to be formal with her. "Good. You will be starting off by demonstrating the 3 basic techniques required to graduate," she continued. "Afterwards you will demonstrate your weapons and taijutsu skills through a series of increasingly difficult spars. No lethal attacks are allowed, so be mindful of your opponent at all times. When I say a spar is over, it's over." "Got it, he responded. "Good, now, show us the academy basics," ordered Tsunade with a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Does she want me to prank them? Sure looks that way to me." Aiming a grin in Tsunade's direction, Naruto proceeded to do the academy's 3 basic techniques, but in reverse order of the normal testing routine. With barely a twitch of his hands Naruto created enough shadow clones to fill every seat in the stadium. This display of sheer power, because no one other than him could have come even close to doing it, left his examiners staring wide-eyed at the stands around them. When he next transformed all of the clones and himself into copies of people from back in his original world, with himself transforming into a perfect replica of his father, the examiners were looking around as fast as they could to see the various versions of people they knew. The last technique, the substitution, was used to move all the examiners along with the Hokage and her advisors up to the Hokage's private box, leaving Naruto standing on the field with several clones of them. "Smartass," grumbled Tsunade as she glared down at a waving Naruto. "Okay, you passed the academy test, but can you pass the official test?" "Bring it on," shouted Naruto, dispelling the clones around him. "He's not on a team, so he's going to run the gauntlet," stated Tsunade, more to herself than anyone else. "Konohamaru, you're up." "Yes, Hokage-sama," agreed the young boy, fresh out of the academy, before he made his way down to the stadium floor. "So, Konohamaru Sarutobi," Naruto said as soon as the young boy landed in front of him. "How do you know my last name?" asked the boy, looking rather puzzled as he dropped into a standard academy taijutsu stance. That, Kono-san, is a secret that I may tell you about someday, replied Naruto with a smile. Whatever, Konohamaru said with a smirk. You'll have to get by me first and that won't be easy. I've been taught all the shortcuts to become Hokage and I won't let you beat me. Glaring up at the Hokage's box, Naruto couldn't help but notice several of the people there cringe. Shortcuts. You let someone teach him shortcuts to becoming Hokage. Were they trying to get the kid killed, or was his teacher just a moron? Looking a bit ashamed, Tsunade was the one to answer. I didn't know about it until recently. His grandfather contracted a supposedly elite Jonin to train him, but the man was a little too awestruck by the privilege of teaching the third Hokage's grandson. He's since been demoted to Chunin, and Konohamaru and his friends were returned to the academy to finish their training. Don't talk about Ebisu-sensei like that, shouted Konohamaru, looking mutinous as he glared at Naruto. He taught me lots of stuff to make becoming Hokage, like my grandpa, easy. No, he just taught you how to die fast, countered Naruto. I'll prove it, and when I do you will start training with me, daily, got it? Yeah, like a loser like you can defeat me, the grandson of the third Hokage. Roared Konohamaru. What followed was not only embarrassing, but eye-opening for the young boy. Naruto never once moved to attack him, instead he just dodged Konohamaru's ever attempt to hit him. This lasted for 5 minutes before the young boy managed to trip over the ridiculously long scarf he had around his neck. Naruto waited for the boy to get back to his feet, something a real enemy would have never done, then continued to dodge the boy's attacks until the kid could barely stand due to exhaustion. Konohamaru finally stumbled, his body too tired to continue, before Naruto caught him by the front of his shirt and lifted him off the ground to hold the boy eye to eye with him. Your grandfather would be ashamed of you right now, Naruto whispered to the boy. Hiruzen Sarutobi was a great man, but he never once boasted about his own greatness. You on the other hand came into this spar thinking your so-called training and your grandfather's reputation would win you this fight. Neither of those things mean a damn in the real world. In the real world you either fight for everything you have, shedding sweat and blood as you work hard for your goals, or you die in a field. That's what your shortcuts got you, an overinflated ego that is going to cost you your life unless you get serious about your training. Setting the boy down on unsteady legs, Naruto sighed and wiped a hand over his face. You remind me of another kid I knew back home. He started off with an ego like yours, but he became a great shinobi once he started really working and forgot about shortcuts and crap like that. You want to be Hokage, you have to work for it. You want to be a leader, you have to bleed for it. There is no easy path to reach your goal. Konohamaru looked like someone had just slapped him. Once Naruto was done speaking, he wasn't the only one either. The pink-haired Chunin that Naruto had noticed earlier was also looking a bit green, probably because they had believed much the same as the youngest Sarutobi. It didn't matter to Naruto, he had said what he needed to say, what people made of it was their own business. Still, he needed to drive the point home to the kid, and there was only ever going to be one way to do that. So, gathering his chakra into his hand, he created a perfect Rasengan before driving it into the ground between him and Konohamaru, knocking the boy off his feet. That is the result of hard work, blood, and sweat, he said as Konohamaru stared at him in awe. There are no shortcuts to this, and there are no shortcuts to being Hokage. Got me. Gotcha, shouted the boy, jumping back to his feet with a newfound determination. I'll show you. I'll become the greatest shinobi in the village by working hard. Yeah, you will, cause I'm going to be training you from now on, stated Naruto, glancing up at Tsunade and getting a nod from her. You meet me at the Hokage Tower bright and early tomorrow and we'll get you started. Bring your friends, if you want. Will do, boss, shouted the boy, right before he passed out from exhaustion. Naruto created a clone to carry the boy up to the Hokage's box. I want to talk to this Ebisu, he mentioned. I think he needs a bit more than a demotion. Konohamaru's taijutsu is a mess, he never even once thought of using a jutsu, and he has no stamina. The only shortcut he taught that kid was to kill him faster. I'll arrange for him to be there tomorrow morning when you pick the kid up, stated Tsunade, finding she wanted to see the former elite Jonin taught a lesson. Just don't kill him. I won't, agreed Naruto, but there is a lot you can live through while wishing you were dead. Tsunade nodded, then gestured for the pink-haired Chunin to enter the ring. Chunin Ichigo Haruno, you're up next. No way. A male version of Sakura. Well, he does sort of look like her, so maybe a brother that didn't exist in our world. Watch me fight, Itachi-kun, shouted the rather effeminate boy as he awkwardly leapt from the Hokage's box. Are we sure that's male? It has an Adam's apple and only males have that. I'm going to beat you up, you big meanie, shouted the pink-haired boy, causing Naruto to roll his eyes. Don't you underestimate me, I'm way stronger than that little boy was. Looking up at Tsunade, Naruto just asked, can I? No, you can't, she replied, knowing instantly what Naruto meant. Please, begged Itachi. No, he can't kill him, Tsunade stated firmly, or as firmly as you can while watching a pink-haired boy blowing kisses to another boy. Damn, shouted both boys together, getting a smug smile from Ichigo. The Hokage knows I'm too powerful for you to try that will, so she's protecting you from me, stated the boy before sticking his tongue out at Naruto. Oh, that's it. Start the match, groaned Naruto, ready to end this farce. Begin, commanded Tsunade only to blink as a second later the pink-haired boy was flying across the stadium. A moment later the boy hit the wall with enough force to crack the concrete, then falling to the ground unconscious. Winner, Naruto. Those with the training for it saw Naruto take one step forward, striking Ichigo in the chest with enough force to send the boy flying. To anyone else it would have looked like he just shifted his feet, that's how fast the blow had been. Even Guy with his years of training had to admit Naruto was no one to mess around with. Kakashi on the other hand was looking rather ashamed, trying for all he was worth to hide behind Guy. Was that supposed to accomplish something? Asked Naruto, looking up at the Hokage's box with a puzzled expression. Tsunade, who was busy glaring at Kakashi, shook her head saying, Ichigo is Kakashi's student. He assured me that the boy was a highly trained shinobi, much improved over his previous test results during his first Chunin exam. Obviously, he was full of shit. Well, he has perfect chakra control and was the smartest student in his graduating class at the academy, argued Kakashi, still looking ashamed. Of course he's got perfect chakra control, yelled Naruto, glaring at the one-eyed Jonin. He's got smaller chakra reserves than Konohamaru had. Hell, I've got more chakra in my right nut than that kid does in his whole body. Your testicles aside, I'll be personally reviewing Ichigo's current skill level and rank, Tsunade said, finally turning away from a nervous-looking Kakashi. I knew letting you field promote that boy was a mistake, Kakashi. Sorry, Hokage-sama, apologized the silver-haired man. Anyway, your next challenger is at least a known fighter, said Tsunade, focusing back on why they were there. Itachi Uchiha, you're up. Itachi, unlike the previous two combatants, used a shunshin to appear in front of Naruto. Let's have a good fight, huh? Sounds good to me, Itachi-san. Begin, shouted the Hokage, and the boys were on the move. To the untrained eye the two boys just seemed to vanish, but to the Hokage and her advisors along with the Jonin present, the boys were fighting a tremendous battle. Tsunade watched closely as they moved from taijutsu to weapons, and finally a combination of both as they dashed around the stadium floor at top speed. Itachi favored a ninjutsu, while Naruto stuck with kunai, but they both showed great skill with their weapons of choice. The fight continued for several minutes, sparks and blurs of color being the only thing a civilian would see, before they jumped away from each other. You're very skilled, Naruto-san, Itachi said with a smile, not looking the least bit tired. Same to you, Itachi-san, complimented Naruto, also looking as if he had not just fought an intense high-speed battle. Shall we take it up a notch? By all means, But I should warn you, Itachi said with a smile, I'm the village's genjutsu master. Big surprise there, muttered Naruto. You do realize that you're immune to genjutsu now, right? Since when? Since the moment you absorbed me, silly. My chakra, combined with your own, prevents foreign chakra from being able to influence you. As Momo was telling him this, Itachi seemed to vanish. Well, he would have vanished if Naruto hadn't seen him leave behind a translucent version of himself and walk calmly towards him. Naruto assumed, and Momo confirmed, that Itachi had cast a genjutsu to make it seem he was still standing in front of him. Unfortunately for Itachi, Naruto could only see the chakra anchoring the genjutsu, while still seeing the Uchiha clearly. Not to say two couldn't play at that game. Letting Itachi approach him, Naruto pretended not to notice anything was wrong. In the Hokage's box he noticed Tsunade and her advisors frowning, thinking he had fallen for the trick. Only Jiraiya was smirking as Itachi drew out a kunai and sliced at Naruto's chest. What happened next had everyone stunned. Instead of seeing blood as Itachi struck, the Naruto he had been fighting suddenly exploded in a cloud of smoke. Everyone looked around to see where the real Naruto might be, but it wasn't until they heard clapping that they looked up at the roof of the Hokage's box. Sitting there, calmly eating a cup of ramen, sat Naruto. Itachi looked confused for a moment, then as comprehension dawned on him he started to laugh. The clones from the start of the test, Itachi finally said with a smirk. You let one of them fight Konohamaru and Ichigo, didn't you? Yep, confirmed Naruto, finishing his ramen. Didn't want to waste too much chakra on the preliminaries. Such fires of youth, gasped Guy. To think we saw one of his clones putting on such a youthful performance with Itachi-kun. Your fires of youth burn brighter than I could have imagined, Naruto-san. Something like that, agreed Naruto, having a flashback of Guy and Lee hugging. I think that proves he's got what it takes to be a Chunin, Hokage-sama, Itachi said as he shunshined back up to the Hokage's box. He used good planning to put himself in position of strength, never revealed his secrets, and planned ahead for future battles. I have to agree with Itachi-san, Hokage-sama, agreed Hiashi. The boy used planning, stealth, and advanced fighting skills. He has my vote for Chunin. Makoto and Jiraiya also voiced their approval, the old hermit giving Naruto a thumbs up as the blonde leapt back down to the stadium floor with Tsunade explaining the next part. Okay, I've got to agree with you on that one. Guy, you're up next. No need, Hokage-sama, objected the spandex-wearing man falling into what everyone called his nice guy pose, with sunlight glinting off his teeth. I can already tell just from watching that Naruto-kun has exceeded the skill level of most Jonin. I've personally sparred with Itachi-kun and he is a most youthful opponent, nearly matching myself with his fires of youth, so for young Naruto-kun to match him in battle, even a friendly spar, shows Naruto-kun is worthy of being a Jonin. One breath. What type of being is he that he can say all that in one breath? Also one sentence. Added Naruto, looking up at the Hokage and her companions as they talked. Not as much yelling as the guy I knew, but still a lot of youth and crap like that. I agree with Guy, Kakashi stated, not even bothering to look up from his orange book. The kid has already proved he's got the skills. Are you kidding me? Questioned Naruto, though he wasn't that surprised the Kakashi of this world would be as lazy as the one from his. I had one decent fight and you think that proves I'm Jonin level. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'd love it if it was that easy, but even I know you need more than a few flashy moves to qualify as a Jonin. I'll test him, offered Jiraiya with a cheesy grin. If he's got half the moves I think he does, he's got this in the bag, but the kid is right. One decent fight does not a Jonin make. Tsunade nodded, though she was glaring at Kakashi. Alright, Jiraiya, make sure the kid is up to snuff. Leaping out of the Hokage's box and landing as if he had jumped a foot down rather than 20, Jiraiya walked over to Naruto with a grin on his face. What are the rules, brat? Just like his pervy sage back home, this Jiraiya knew that if they went all out in such a small area there would be tremendous damage. That was why Naruto and his mentor had always set up rules for their spars, unless they were someplace where they could completely cut loose. Thinking about it, Naruto figured they should avoid anything past Jonin level, though a bit of flash wouldn't be out of place. With that in mind, he smirked at the old man. No sage mode, nothing over Jonin, and no lethal attacks, he stated firmly, though he was still smiling. There's a lot of leeway there, kiddo, countered Jiraiya. Like you said, there's a lot you can do to someone and not kill them. So, no crippling moves either. Deal, agreed Naruto as both men looked up at Tsunade to start the fight. Raising her hand, still glaring at Kakashi, both men prepared. When she dropped her hand a moment later, they vanished in a cloud of dust. This was not just a taijutsu battle, however, so speed was only needed to provide room between them to prepare. For Naruto, this meant creating a horde of shadow clones to use as a distraction. On the other hand, Jiraiya used the distance to summon several mid-sized toads to attack the clones. Both men were standing at far sides of the stadium floor, looking more like they were playing a game of shogi rather than fighting a battle. The toads cancel out the distraction of the clones, admired Makoto, her Sharingan active as she observed the fight. Not really, argued Itachi. Naruto is replacing the clones as fast as the toads are destroying them. In a battle like this, it would come down to who has the most chakra, which we already know from his earlier display Naruto has plenty of. As they had agreed on no lethal of crippling moves, Naruto picked up a pebble off the floor and threw it into the air in Jiraiya's direction. Making several hand signs, he used a clone technique normally for increasing the number of kunai you threw at someone. In this case, it turned one pebble into several thousand pebbles, each of them raining down on Jiraiya's location. The older shinobi saw this and substituted himself with one of Naruto's clone, letting it take the hit while he destroyed several more clones with several quick punches and kicks. Naruto tried several times to get his clones into a position where they could attack the more experienced man, but not wanting to hurt the toads, he was rather limited in options. The crowd above was watching closely, surprised at how equally matched the two shinobi below them were. Obviously Jiraiya was limiting himself. They had all heard the rules the boy had set for the match, but even then it was fairly even. Most of them realized fairly quickly that Naruto was limiting himself as well, but the question was really how much was he limiting himself by. Tsunade, being the most familiar with Jiraiya's abilities, knew he was holding back a great deal. Makoto and Hiashi were also aware of this, but still rather surprised that a young unknown shinobi could keep up at this level given his young age. Take it up a notch, yelled Jiraiya. You got it, old man, replied Naruto with a grin. Suddenly the clones all started creating Rasengans, driving them into the ground to create a massive cloud of dust that obscured the stadium floor. For his part, Jiraiya suddenly faded from sight, leaving everyone wondering what the two of them were up to. A moment later the dust was blown away by a massive clash between the two figures going toe-to-toe in a taijutsu match. Blows were struck back and forth, each looking for an opening as the other expertly blocked or countered. Jiraiya may have had the advantage of a longer reach due to his height, but Naruto made up for it with his speed. The two of them clashed for several minutes, only finally breaking apart when Jiraiya managed to land the first true hit on Naruto since the started. It wasn't a powerful kick, but Jiraiya had managed to sweep Naruto's legs out from him, dropping the boy to the ground where a follow-up leg drop hit the boy's chest. Leaping away as Naruto recovered and rolled away from him, Jiraiya's hands flew through a series of hand signs before he slammed the ground with one hand. Instantly 4 rock walls sprang up around Naruto to trap him. At least it would have trapped him if Naruto hadn't responded with a Rasengan to the wall between them, followed by a wave of wind that knocked Jiraiya from his feet. Jiraiya recovered quickly, using another earth-based technique to block a second wind blade thrown at him by the blonde. Thinking he had a second to recover, Jiraiya was caught unaware when a clone of Naruto suddenly burst out of the ground at his feet and delivered a massive haymaker to his chin. Sent flying into the air by the force of it, Jiraiya was surprised to see another Naruto falling towards him. He only had a second to concentrate, replacing himself with a rubble from his previous attempt to trap Naruto. He reappeared behind Naruto, ready to go back on the attack, but was once again surprised when Naruto unleashed another wind blade at him. The blade would have seriously hurt him if not for Jiraiya dropping to the ground under it and rolling away before Naruto could follow up his attack. Preparing to use a fire technique, Jiraiya was just about to launch a fireball at the blonde boy when he suddenly felt another set of arms around his waist. Feeling himself being lifted up into the air, Jiraiya tried to break loose from Naruto's hold on him, but it was too late. A second later his head made contact with the stone floor of the stadium and his vision was filled with stars. It wasn't enough to knock him out, but the impact left him dazed long enough for Naruto to dash forward and slap a chakra-suppressing seal on his forehead. The moment he felt his chakra fade he knew he was beaten, even if he had been holding back. Winner! Naruto Uzumai, bellowed the Hokage as she leapt down to the stadium floor to check on her husband and Naruto. Damn, brat, that hurt, groaned Jiraiya as Tsunade started examining him. Naruto snorted, rubbing his tender ribs. And that leg drop didn't. Think you cracked one or two of my ribs. That's what you two consider non-lethal. Barked Tsunade as she started to use healing chakra on Jiraiya's head. Yes. Both men replied with a smirk. I started him off at low Jonin and worked my way up to elite, explained Jiraiya as Tsunade worked. He didn't hesitate and adapted well to the situation. Even when surprised he had a plan to escape along with a follow-up attack. He also has a good mastery over his wind element, which he proved with those wind blades. Yes, they were powerful, but he blunted the leading edge to prevent serious injury. By the way, where did you learn that one, kid? Tsunade had now finished healing Jiraiya and was moving over to work on Naruto as he explained. I figured out how to do that when I was working on my advanced wind element training. I was trying to find the secret of how to cut a waterfall and stumbled across it. It's more of a stretched out wind bullet than a wind blade. Downside, it moves much slower than the blade, but can take out a large group standing together. I've used it to clear a path in enemy lines before, letting my clones deal with the people on the ground as I move forward. Good strategic thinking, voiced Hiashi as he joined them. If you don't claim that as a clan technique, it would be a fine addition to the village's repertoire. Nah, village can have it, Naruto stated as Tsunade finished healing his ribs. I've got tons of techniques I've stumbled on over time, but most of them are ones I learned fighting other people. Those I'll hand over. I've only got a handful I'll keep to myself. That's fine, Naruto-san, with a smile, before he turned serious. I am however curious as to how you learned the Rasengan. To my knowledge, that technique was only known to the fourth and Master Jiraiya. We'll explain that one later, Hiashi, stated Tsunade, glancing around at the group now standing around them. The answer is a village secret. Let him come, Tsunade-sama, Naruto said, nearly choking on the honorific. He's one of your advisors, so he should know as well. Tsunade seemed to think about that for a moment, then nodded in agreement. I think we'll add one more person, as they have a tie to this as well. Meanwhile, I am happy to announce that based on what I've just seen, you are now promoted to Jonin of Konoha, Naruto Uzumaki. Thanks, shouted Naruto, bouncing around like a little kid at the news. A short time later found Naruto sitting in the Hokage's office with several people. Obviously Tsunade was there, as was Jiraiya, Makoto, and Hiashi. Mito was also there with, surprisingly, Hinata sitting at her side. Anko and Yugao were there, wearing their masks as they were technically on duty, but the other Anbu guards were absent. Naruto sat across from Mito, looking at her a little nervously, which in turn was making her nervous. Mito, Tsunade said with a warm smile, though it held a tinge of sadness. What I am about to tell you is the complete truth. Some of it will come as a shock, while some of it will seem like a complete fantasy, but it will all be true. I want you to stay calm, hear me out, then we will discuss any questions you have. Do you understand? Yeah, Granny, I gotcha, replied the girl, causing Tsunade's eyebrow to twitch. I will start off then by telling you one of the most highly guarded secrets in the village, began Tsunade. 17 years ago the village was attacked by the Kyubi, or at least that is the public side of the story. That had been the start of a really difficult conversation for Mito to hear. Several times she had broken down and cried, burying her face in Hinata's shoulder when she did. Learning her father was the fourth Hokage was one thing, but learning her hero Kushina Uzumaki was her mother, well that was a bit more than she could take. Naruto thought it ironic that in his world he had never heard the name of either of his parents until he was fighting Nagato to save his village, but Mito had learned all about Kushina in school. She was justifiably upset to learn the third Hokage had lied to her every time she asked if he knew who her parents were. Each time he had told her she was named after Kushina to honor the last Uzumaki's sacrifice, never revealing Mito was actually related to the woman. It was only when Tsunade explained the need to keep her existence secret from her parents' enemies that Mito seemed to calm down a bit, though not much. Next came the hard part, explaining Naruto's presence. Naruto took the story over at that point, answering numerous questions from Mito, Hinata, and Hiashi as the others already knew his background. At first they all seemed a bit skeptical, at least until Tsunade and Jiraiya confirmed it based on blood tests and certain other factors. Naruto didn't mention Momo to anyone, that could wait until he knew them all a bit better, but he told her everything else. Surprisingly, Mito took the news fairly well, even accepting Naruto's cover story after it was explained to her why he would be clan head to protect her from being forcibly made a part of the CRA. As long as there are two of us alive, no one can force us into the CRA, explained Naruto. I always wanted family, a teary-eyed Mito cried as she flung herself at him, wrapping him in a bone-crushing hug. Now I've got one. Something like that, muttered Tsunade, looking between the newfound family and Hinata. For her part, Hinata had remained silent throughout Naruto's story. She had only asked 2 questions, both of which had to deal with his interactions with his world's version of her. It struck Naruto as a bit odd when she asked how well he knew his Hinata and whether the other her had known his true heritage. When he answered, blushing as he did it, that they had never dated but he had wanted to after the war, she smiled sadly. It was when he told her that the other girl never knew his true parentage that she nodded and the sadness seemed to leave her eyes. That did not mean she was the only one to pay attention to Naruto's answers to those questions. Hiashi was paying very close attention as Naruto told his story, including a very watered-down version of the blonde's treatment prior to becoming a shinobi. He only asked one question, after Naruto had finished his story and Mito had virtually tried to attach herself to the young shinobi. Looking incredibly serious, he was almost glaring at the blonde as he spoke. He asked if Naruto knew anything about his responsibilities as a namikaze. I'm not sure what you mean, Hiashi-san, answered a confused-looking Naruto, with a still crying Mito cuddled up in his arms. The old man, like yours did with Mito, never told me a thing about my dad's family. The pervy sage died before he could tell me anything, and what with the war we were fighting and all, well, I never really had time to worry about it. I only met my dad once, same for my mom, and our time was pretty limited, so questions about family stuff was pretty much a bust. So, you know nothing of any standing agreements there might be between your clan and any others? Asked Hiashi, now having everyone's eyes on him. Makoto cleared her throat, getting everyone's attention. Is this the right time to bring that up, Hiashi? No, I want to know what he's talking about, countered Naruto, noticing that Tsunade and Jiraiya were looking a bit nervous now. Something's up, I can tell. What's up? Looking at Tsunade, almost as if asking for permission, Hiashi sighed when the blonde Hokage nodded at him. The Namikaze and Hyuga family had formed an alliance before my brother and I were born. Good for them, said Naruto, waiting for the other shoe to fall, because his life was never that easy. What's that got to do with me? The alliance was to be sealed with a political marriage, explained Hiashi, looking suitably nervous as he spoke. A main family member of the Hyuga would marry the clan heir of the Namikaze family. It was not possible in my generation because there were only males born at the time and it was deemed too important an alliance to marry off a child to an adult, even for political reasons. So, with that in mind, the marriage was pushed back to the next generation. When the Namikaze were wiped out save for Minato, the alliance was still in effect, but would have to wait until he had a child. Minato eventually married Kushina and they announced they were expecting a child. It was glad tidings because I had just recently found out that my wife was also expecting, meaning we had another chance to seal the alliance. Yes, the Namikaze clan was reduced to one survivor, but they still controlled a vast amount of money and businesses, most of which Minato asked me to monitor for him. But he had a daughter, Mito said, her head resting on Naruto's chest as she glared at Hiashi. Can't seal the alliance if both clans just have daughters, isn't that right, Hiashi? Naruto was a bit confused by the vehemence in Mito's tone, but then he was confused by this whole thing. So, it gets pushed back again to when Mito and Hinata have kids, right? Not exactly, Naruto, Tsunade answered. I forgot all about that old alliance when we created your backstory, a story we've already set in motion. You are now the Namikaze heir, the first male in a generation with a marriage-age Hyuga female since the alliance was first agreed upon. Oh, shit, Naruto-kun, this could be really bad. No shit. So, let me see if I understand what you're saying, growled Naruto, not happy how the conversation was going. You're basically telling me that I am now going to be forced to marry someone to keep an old alliance in place. Who might this Hyuga girl be? Me, answered Hinata, her eyes looking anything but happy about the fact. My sister is already betrothed to Konohamaru Sarutobi, so that just leaves me to fulfill the alliance as there are no other main branch females our age at the moment. Naruto was in shock, but from the way Mito tensed up in his arms, so was she. You don't look that happy about this, Hinata-chan, why is that? I'm already in a relationship, though it is not a commonly accepted one, explained Hinata, glancing at her father with less than friendly intentions. I was made aware of the alliance between our two clans, but ignored it because I was under the impression the Namikaze clan no longer existed. So, I sought my own love match and found it. Unfortunately, I was informed several years ago, by Hiashi-san, that while I might dally with my love, I would eventually need to submit to a marriage arranged for me by the clan. The purpose of that marriage would be with the sole intent of carrying on my bloodline. The most commonly forwarded name was that of my cousin, Neji. Why can't you just marry your boyfriend and have kids with him? Asked Naruto, more than a little confused when Hinata blushed. Well, that is not possible, Naruto-san, she finally explained, every eye on the room focused on her. You see, I don't have a boyfriend. I have a girlfriend. Oh, well, that would explain it, conceded Naruto with a slight blush at the images that suddenly popped into his head. Well, if you are anything like my Hinata-chan, your girlfriend is very lucky to have you in her life. If you don't mind me asking, who is it? Much to his surprise, Mito suddenly raised her hand. It's me, Naruto-kun. We've been dating since we graduated from the academy. Good for you, kid, voiced Anko, giving the two girls a thumbs up. Hiashi, hanging his head in shame, whispered, I never begrudged you finding love, daughter. I just wanted you to be aware the responsibilities you still had to fulfill as my heir. Turning back to glare at Hiashi, Mito yelled, oh, she knew how you felt. I remember the night she told you we were dating. Don't forget, I was there. You told looked like you were going to throw up, then you told her to forget her, confused feelings and focus on reality. Wasn't that the last time she ever called you father, Hiyashi? Yes, it was, admitted Hiyashi, once again hanging his head in shame. So, you don't want this marriage any more than I do, right? Asked Naruto, forgetting anyone else was in the room to focus solely on Hinata. What would be the repercussions if we didn't get married? No, I can't say I'm thrilled about this marriage, admitted Hinata with a sad smile. However, my hands are tied. If we don't marry, the Hyuga clan will be required to immediately pay back all the money they borrowed from the Namikaze. Hiyashi-san would be required to turn over control to you of all the companies he has been running for the Namikaze clan, which would be difficult for you to deal with so suddenly. Most importantly, the Hyuga would be forced to near bankruptcy with the loss of the money your family loaned us. I don't care about money or businesses, Hinata-chan, argued Naruto. I'd wipe out the debt in a heartbeat and I couldn't care less about the businesses. You can't do that, Naruto-san, Makoto quietly said. Only the original signers of the alliance contract could wipe out the debt. All the old contracts like that are set up that way to prevent either clan from welching out on their part of the bargain. Fine, we work out a payment plan, countered Naruto. Tsunade shook her head, saying, no, I've seen the contract. The money has to be returned within 1 week, nowhere near enough time for the Hyuga to come up with the money. Hold on, if I'm backing out of the contract, shouldn't I be the one paying the penalty? Asked Naruto, looking intently between the 3 clan heads present. The Hyuga were not as prosperous back when the contract was originally written, explained Hiyashi. The only thing we had to offer in return for the alliance was a ceremonial dagger and of course the person that would marry into your clan. It was only after we received the money from your clan that we were able to become so financially stable. Considering most of our wealth and power is built upon the money your clan gave us, to lose that money would reduce us to little more than well-dressed beggars in the street. Oh this, growled Naruto, lifting Mito off his lap so he could stand and start to pace. What if we do marry, but I just step aside and let Hinata-chan and Mito-chan lead their own lives? I am required to have a child with my husband, as dictated by the contract, Naruto-kun, Hinata informed him. We have 1 year from the wedding before I have to be pregnant, to prove that we have consummated our marriage. Groaning, Naruto started pacing faster. This is so ed up, you know that right? Mito-chan, what do you think of this? I agree with you, this is ed up, the redhead agreed, glaring at Hiyashi again. Personally, I want to see this contract to make sure it's not some bullshit tactic of Hiyashi Tem's to keep me and Hinata-chan apart. It's not, kiddo, Jiraiya said, walking over and sitting next to the young woman, pulling her into his arms and hugging her. I've seen the contract, didn't like it much either when I learned about it. Your dad hated it too, but kind of forgot about it after he got married. I hate to admit it, but so did I until Hiyashi brought it up. This is such crap, growled Naruto as he continued to pace. You won't let 2 people that love each other get married, but you'll force someone to get married to live up to some contract they didn't even sign. How messed up is that? There has got to be another option. Makoto coughed, drawing everyone's attention to her as she pulled a scroll down off a shelf behind Tsunade's desk. Naruto recognized the scroll, it was the one that contained the village laws. He had seen his Gigi studying it repeatedly when he was a little boy. Gigi always acted like it was the most important thing in the room when he opened it, but Naruto rarely ever paid attention to it. Now, watching Makoto open the scroll and unroll it to a certain portion, he kind of hoped the answer to his problems was contained inside it. There is a second option, Naruto-san, she explained, though she looked a bit worried. The solution is a bit extreme, but might work for you in this case. It might allow you all to be happy, but it would require a sacrifice on your part, Naruto-san. What sort of sacrifice? Naruto asked, stopping his pacing and focusing a grim expression at Makoto. Looking rather worried, the Uchiha matriarch answered him. What I propose is that you willing enact the Clan Restoration Act, taking multiple wives to rebuild not just your clan, but also the Uzumaki clan. What? Bellowed Naruto, now looking furiously at Makoto. How does that solve the problem? Now you're talking about dragging even more people into this mess. That would just rob even more people of a chance to find real love. I never said that, Naruto-san, Makoto objected, not looking all that worried as the furious blonde glared at her. Yes, Hinata-san might be required to marry you to satisfy the alliance contract, but the 5 other girls wouldn't be. 5 other girls? Asked Mito, intently listening to everything Makoto was saying. Why only 5 other girls? Contrary to popular belief and urban legend, the CRA only allows for 3 wives per clan, explained Tsunade, her eyes now looking a little brighter. In Naruto's cases he has 2 clans to restore, so he would need 3 for each clan. Hinata would marry him under the Namikaze name to satisfy the Hyuga requirement, but Naruto would be free to meet and fall in love with the 5 other girls. No one would force them to marry him, and if he never found any other girls, there is no requirement for him to marry anyone else. But how does it help Mito and Hinata? Asked Naruto, looking as if he was already dreading the answer. Jiraiya was the one to answer, snickering as he did. Cause if you marry Mito as well, she and Hinata could be together legally without anyone looking down on their relationship. What the? Began Naruto, but he was cut off. I'll do it, shouted Mito, leaping into the arms of her lover. Anything to be with Hinata. But you're my cousin, hell, you could be considered my sister. Naruto screamed, blushing furiously. Actually, cousin is closer to the mark, given the results of the blood tests I did yesterday, countered Tsunade. Legally, in clan matters, it wouldn't make a difference if you were brother and sister, you could still marry. I married my brother, added Makoto, looking completely unconcerned by that fact. He was my best friend all my life, so it wasn't that hard an adjustment to make to being his wife. But, I barely know Mito or Hinata, stammered Naruto, all the while listening to Momo giggling inside his head. I don't care, Naruto-kun, Mito stated, standing up and walking towards a very confused Naruto. Honestly, I just met you, so I don't think of you like that, but if it means I can be with Hinata-chan, I'll marry you right now. She was just about to reach out and touch him, but Naruto pulled away. I need time to think. Vanishing from the room, leaving a very worried group of people behind him, Naruto was gone in a flash of yellow light. Tsunade immediately ordered Neko and Hubby to find him, with the 2 women instantly taking off. Jiraiya could already tell Naruto was on top of the Hokage monument, but didn't say anything as he walked over to comfort his shocked-looking goddaughter. Hinata was also looking distraught, but when Hiashi walked towards her, she just glared at him, causing him to stop short. Tsunade and Makoto just stared at the scroll in front of them like it was a venomous snake. It took Anko and Yugao an hour to find Naruto, who was currently sitting on his father's head at the Hokage monument. They approached him quietly, worried that he might be thinking of doing something stupid. They needn't have worried, but as they watched the sun setting in the distance they could see tears rolling down the young man's face. It was a heartbreaking sight. You can join me if you want, Naruto said, never once turning to look at them. Are you alright, Naruto-san? Asked Yugao as she and Anko took seats on either side of him. Not really, he admitted with a wry chuckle. I should have known the moment Makoto-san said the word sacrifice, I was going to get shafted. It's kind of the theme of my life. All my life people have been doing things that mean I will be forced to sacrifice something, whether I know it or not. My father did it. The third did it repeatedly. My teammates did it. Hell, I even did it several times because there were no other options. I know I've only been here 2 days, but I hoped this place would be different. I really did hope that for once I would get to live life the way I wanted, not having to give up my own happiness so someone else could find theirs. Watching as the sun vanished below the horizon, Naruto sighed before continuing. I won't lie, I think I could have fallen in love with my Hinata Haim back home. For a moment, Before I looked in her eyes, I was really happy when I found out I had a second chance here in this world. Then I saw the sadness in her eyes and knew it wasn't going to happen. Then I find out even if she did marry me, she was only doing it because she was being forced to. Oh, don't forget if she doesn't, she bankrupts her family. The topping on the ramen being she's already in love with someone and I would be robbing her of that as well. Oh, but don't worry, we've got a solution to solve the problem, Naruto, he said in a mocking high-pitched voice. All you have to do is marry multiple girls, who may or may not love you for you and not your wealth. The two women next to him remained silent as Naruto continued to rant. You know what the CRA really is. It's the absolute epitome of marriage for political and financial gain. Forget that crap about rebuilding your clan, it's really about money and political power. You just have to forget about love, but don't forget all the gold in your bank account, 'cause the girls that would be interested in a marriage like that sure won't forget. Sure, Hinata and Mito get to be happy together, but what about me? Once again I get to sacrifice my happiness for someone else. I'm tired of it. You're a good guy, Naruto, Anko finally said, laying a hand on his arm. It might look bad now, but you'll figure something out. Oh, I thought of lots of ways out of this while I was sitting here, grunted Naruto. For example, I could cancel the alliance and demand Hinata in payment, then marry her to Mito as a clan issue. Downside, I leave the entire Hyuga clan homeless. Anko and Yugao stared slack-jawed at how ruthless the plan was, but Naruto was still talking. I could also commit suicide, leaving Mito as my heir after marrying Hinata. Downside, I still leave them in a position where they have to marry again to have kids. That and I don't like the idea of dying quite yet. None of my options are good, Naruto said after a long pause. If I had known about this even a few hours earlier, before I took my test, I could have just left the village and never come back. Now that people know the truth about my heritage, even if it's a limited number of people, that's not really an option anymore. Hell, Jiraiya would track me down if Tsunade asked him to. Even if he didn't find me, Mito would become my heir by default and the burden would still fall on her and Hinata to have kids with someone they didn't love, with their kids having to put up with this bullshit situation. Or, you could marry them and do your best to be happy, kid, cut in Anko. I mean, every guy dreams of having multiple hot women all to themselves. You, Anko, roared Naruto, causing the dark-haired Anbu to jump back from him in surprise. Would you be happy if you were told you effectively had to rape an unwilling woman and force her to have you child? Oh, let's not forget, you are being forced to do it because her entire family is being held hostage until you do. Screw you, bitch. I'm not like that. She didn't mean it like that, Naruto-san, Yugao said, trying to calm the blonde down as chakra started to leak out of his skin, scaring the crap out of Anko. She was just making a poorly timed joke. It's not a joke, yelled Naruto, now turning and glaring at Yugao. I know people seem to find my pain funny, but I'm sick of it. Just once I want someone to put what I want first. I'm sick and tired of being the brunt of Kami's sense of humor and giving everyone else around me a chuckle. This shit isn't funny, not at all. I just had to give up everything and everyone I love to come here. Isn't that a large enough sacrifice to ask of me? I'm so sorry, Naruto-kun. Either was any other way I would have taken it, but there wasn't. Naruto could hear that Momo was sobbing as she spoke, but at the moment he just couldn't control his rage. Standing, he strode over to a large rock formation, easily the size of a two-story house. Gathering all his rage and chakra into his hand, Naruto slammed his fist into the solid rock. The resulting explosion reduced the solid rock to fine dust in a cataclysmic display of power. The two Anbu were literally shaking in fear at the sight, knowing not even Tsunade could do something like that with one hit. A moment later when a full platoon of Anbu arrived to investigate, along with Tsunade and Jiraiya, Naruto ignored them. One foolish Anbu tried to stop Naruto when the blonde started walking towards another large rock formation. Jiraiya tried to stop the fool, but he wasn't fast enough. As the Anbu codenamed Pig drew his ninjutsu to attack, Naruto was suddenly in front of him. Faster than anyone could follow, not even Jiraiya, Naruto broke the masked man's arm before he could draw his weapon. A second later the man was flying over the edge of the monument when Naruto kicked him in the chest. It was only thanks to Jiraiya's fast work that the man was saved from falling to his death. However, no one else noticed that as the Anbu guards attacked Naruto all at once. They never stood a chance. Seconds later Naruto was standing amidst a ring of injured and moaning Anbu, still looking furious as he spoke. This is the power that I was forced to wield, a product of every sacrifice that was forced upon me. Once I wanted nothing more than to use this power to protect my precious people, but now I would trade it all for one person to really care about me. I was always told, to the point I couldn't help but believe it, that all those sacrifices would be worth it someday in the future. Funny thing is, I'm still being asked to make sacrifices, but I've yet to see the worth of any of them. Naruto, called Jiraiya, trying to calm the young man down. I know what you mean, but this isn't as bad as you think it is. I mean, look at the upside of this. You're going to end up with several women. Anko and Yugao both tried to warn him not to finish his sentence, but it was too late. Naruto was moving before anyone could respond, grabbing Jiraiya by the throat and lifting the struggling man off his feet. Tsunade tried to stop him, but Naruto had begun unconsciously channeling nature chakra, so that when the Hokage tried to knock him away from her husband she just managed to hurt her hand when she hit him. Naruto barely turned his head to glare at her before he turned back to this world's version of his mentor. Because in whatever world you exist I know you're a pervert at heart and don't mean anything by your comment, I won't snap your neck, growled Naruto, dropping the now blue-faced Sannin on the ground. Next time someone thinks to make a joke about my current situation, I'll be far less merciful. Suddenly Naruto vanished in a show of pure speed. Jiraiya was winded but could detect the boy's location in the Namikaze compound. What the was that? Anko sighed, watching as Yugao tended to their injured comrades who Naruto had only knocked the wind out of rather than anything more serious. Naruto-san is not happy about the current situation. He feels that he is being forced into a loveless marriage because the Hyuga family is being held hostage by the contract between his family and theirs. He also feels that he is being asked to sacrifice his happiness to promote someone else's. From what he was saying, this type of thing has happened several times in his past, added Yugao, helping a young Anbu agent to their feet. In fact, from the sound of it, this has been happening repeatedly all his life. Yeah, evidently he was in love with someone back home and had hopes that he might rekindle that relationship here, continued Anko, not going into too many so not to give away any secrets she shouldn't. For a moment he thought that might be possible here, but when he learned the truth of the situation he was convinced this was just another situation where he would have to make a sacrifice to aid someone else. The topic of the CRA also seems to be a sore subject with him, Yugao pointed out as she finished looking over her fellow Anbu. He feels that being a part of it will rob him of the chance to meet and fall in love with anyone due to them knowing he is the last of a clan, so they will only want him for his money and power. That doesn't excuse him from attacking my Anbu, or nearly killing one of them, Tsunade shouted, looking at her obviously overmatched Anbu. The idiot was never in danger of dying, countered Jiraiya, holding up a spool of fine wire. Kid tied this around the idiot's belt, making sure he might get the shit scared out of him, but he wouldn't die. Not bad considering this little moron was going to attack the boy for no reason. He was trying to leave, barked Tsunade, but Jiraiya would have none of it. And what right did you have to stop him from doing so? Asked her husband, his face now as serious as she had ever seen it. Yes, the boy destroyed a rock. Big deal. He didn't attack anyone and he was just venting his frustrations. I seem to recall that you've done similar for less reason, so you're going to tell me it's okay for you to do it but not for him. That's a bit too much hypocrisy for me to stomach, Hokage-sama. Everyone cringed, including Tsunade, because everyone knew Jiraiya only ever called her by her title when he was pissed. Really, really pissed. As it was, the Toad Sage wasn't done with his lecture. Looking every bit the Sannin he was, Jiraiya glared at his wife and then everyone else in the area. A snap of his fingers as he looked at the Anbu guards had them vacating the area as fast as they could, afraid of what he might do to them if they didn't. You forget, Tsunade, just 2 days ago Naruto was fighting for his life in a war comparable to all 3 of the shinobi wars we've fought here, combined, continued Jiraiya, turning back to his wife. 2 days ago he won that war, by himself, but the price was he was forced to leave his own world and come to this one. That's a hell of a thank you for winning a war, might as well have been a kick in the nuts. Hiashi should have kept his mouth shut after hearing what Naruto told him, give he kid time to settle in and come to terms with his lose, but he just had to drop another bomb on the kid. Then Makoto adds her to Ryo, presenting it as a means to make the girls happy. Sure, she pointed out he could meet other girls, but the kid has the right idea about the CRA and you know it. But, it would solve both problems, argued Tsunade, though she didn't look fully convinced of her own words. They could be together and he could find someone to love. The chances of that in a CRA marriage are slim to none, and you know it, Tsunade, replied Jiraiya coldly. Not to mention he feels he is being forced to rape, his words not mine, Hinata to satisfy the wording of the contract, added Yugao. I sort of see his point, Hokage-sama. The kid just wants someone to love him, to care more about him than what he can do for them, Anko continued, hanging her head and sounding depressed as she spoke. You heard what he said, he would give up everything to feel like someone cared about him and wasn't asking him to sacrifice something more for them. Honestly, I agree, from the sound of it he really has sacrificed too much as it is. It had been a month since Naruto's arrival in his new world and with the exception of the first 2 days he had not stepped foot out of the Namikaze estate. Sure, his clones were seen all over town doing D-rank missions as part of his probation, but the real Naruto had yet to leave his new home. In fact, with the exception of Jiraiya, no one had seen the real Naruto since that night at the Hokage monument. Anko and Yugao still stayed at the estate, but they had found the main house sealed with blood seals keyed specifically to Naruto, so they had been staying in the small house at the back of the property for servants. Tsunade had ordered Naruto to present himself to her several times, but he just sent shadow clones instead of appearing in person. The shadow clones were a disconcerting sight most of the time, solemn-faced and refusing to speak any more than they needed to. It was one of them that showed up to pay for the medical treatment to mend the arm of the Anbu that had attacked Naruto that night, tossing a bag of Ryo on the desk of the hospital receptionist before vanishing in a puff of smoke. The other clones would take missions with Anko and Yugao, but they rarely spoke while completing their tasks. All in all it was a little depressing for the pair of Anbu as they tried to make amends to Naruto, only for the clones to shrug and seemingly ignore the young women. Jiraiya was also a slightly different person since that night, his relationship with his wife the Hokage had grown a bit strained. He still felt that Tsunade was acting like a hypocrite, even if she had decided not to press charges against Naruto for his actions at the monument. It didn't help that Tsunade was still convinced that the CRA was the ultimate answer to the problem. He had almost struck her when she suggested ordering 2 female shinobi to seduce Naruto as a means of showing the boy that people cared about him. The resulting conversation, more like rant as Jiraiya yelled at his wife, was heard from the Hokage tower all the way to the front gates of the village. After that Jiraiya had refused to even talk to Tsunade, moving into the Namikaze compound with Naruto, who surprisingly allowed the old hermit to stay in the main house with him. After her falling out with her husband and coming to realize she had made some rather large blunders where Naruto was concerned, Tsunade had attempted several times to apologize to the young blonde. She had summoned him several times to her office, but each time Naruto just sent shadow clones who would just stand before her with emotionless expressions as she tried to talk to them. The fact she was unable to tell if they were the real him or not was frustrating enough, but the way they just looked at her with dead eyes before dispelling in a cloud of smoke made her feel as if she was never going to be able to make this right between them. Seeing as how Jiraiya was siding with Naruto, it was imperative to her that this situation be solved in the best possible way as quickly as possible. She really missed her husband. For his part, Hiyashi looked like someone had kicked his puppy as he went about trying to come up with all the money that would be required to pay back the Namikaze clan. No, he wasn't sure Naruto would turn down the marriage to his daughter, but given the young man's reaction to the news, it was better safe than sorry. The fact that his relationship with his eldest daughter was now even worse than it had been was also tearing him up inside. He really hadn't meant to make Hinata think he was against her relationship with Mito, but looking back on it he could see how she would feel that way. Cursing himself for his choice of words back then, Hiyashi could only pray he would get a way to make it up to her someday, if she ever gave him the chance. Mito for her part was depressed because she felt she had hurt the only family she had in the world, even if she hadn't meant to. She had just been so excited about the thought of being with her girlfriend forever that she had forgotten to take into account how her actions and words might affect Naruto. At first she had been angry with Naruto for seemingly abandoning her, but after Jiraiya explained the situation to her she realized that wasn't the case. Since talking with Jiraiya she had tried to see the real Naruto at least once a day, but each time she spoke to one of his clones they just stated that he currently wasn't seeing any visitors before dispelling without another word. She had even taken to staying with Anko and Yugao in the Namikaze servant quarters, hoping to see the real Naruto in passing, but it hadn't worked so far. It also confused her that she felt herself attracted to the young blonde man, especially since that had never happened to her before. It left her feeling as if she was betraying her girlfriend, being attracted to someone else, which had led her to avoiding Hinata as she thought about the situation. While all that was going on, Hinata was a mess. She hadn't seen much of her girlfriend in a month because Mito was constantly trying to talk with Naruto. The loss of Mito's presence combined with the feeling that she had hurt Naruto without meaning to had left her feeling guilty and alone all the time. Even her performance on missions had begun to suffer as she was constantly distracted by thoughts of the two of them. It was getting so bad she was starting to wonder if maybe she should just break up with Mito. Honestly, she knew it wouldn't solve the problem, especially after learning why Naruto was so dead set against the marriage and use of the CRA. It's hard to feel angry at someone who refuses to force himself on you. The fact that she actually found Naruto attractive and could see herself eventually having feelings for him only added to the problem, mostly because it would be difficult to convince him her feelings were real and not an act. Finally we have Makoto Uchiha who felt she was the cause of the whole mess. She had never meant to hurt Naruto when she suggested the CRA as a solution, but that's exactly what she had done. Admittedly, the CRA was the perfect solution to Hinata and Mito's problem, but she had worded it wrong when she explained the situation. In fact, the whole situation had blown up in her face, leaving her feeling she was responsible for Naruto's current policy of isolation. Now she was trying to find a way out of the situation that would not require Naruto to sacrifice anything, but grant him all the rewards he deserved for the past sacrifices he had made. Sure, he may not have done much here in this world, but after hearing his story Makoto was well aware of all he had done in his old one. It was a frustrating problem and she just hoped she could do something about it. So, all in all, a strange darkness settled across the village even though most people had no idea what was causing the tension in the air. The only bright side of the situation seemed to be a strange red and gold bird that occasionally flew around the village. Children had taken to calling the bird Momo, though their parents didn't know where the name came from. There were even rumors that occasionally the bird would play with the children, sometimes even healing minor scrapes and cuts they got when they got hurt. No one knew where the bird came from, but most agreed it was a good omen for the village. Summon Naruto Namikaze to appear before me, ordered Tsunade to one of her Anbu. Tell him I want to see the real him this time, not another clone. As you command, replied the Anbu, Pig. As it turned out, Pig vanished from Tsunade's office and reappeared moments later in front of the main gate to the Namikaze compound. Since the announcement of Naruto's fictitious backstory, many people had attempted to schedule meetings with him, but they had all been politely turned away. Knocking on the gate, one of Naruto's clones suddenly appeared before Pig, looking at him with an arched eyebrow. You need something. 2 things, said Pig as he kneeled in front of the clone. I know you are just a clone, but I also know that Namikaze-sama will learn of this when you disperse. Please, Namikaze-sama, forgive me for attacking you at the Hokage monument. I was wrong to do so and hold no hard feelings against you for it. The boss will consider your words, Pig-san, stated the clone emotionlessly. Also, please, don't kneel before me. I am just a clone and the boss is just a regular man, not some high and mighty figure demanding forced respect. He will either earn your respect, or not. He has earned my respect, countered Pig, standing up. He didn't need to pay for my medical treatment as I was at fault in the situation, but he did it anyway. That is worthy of respect and shows that Namikaze-sama is a good man at heart. Maybe, said the clone, looking a bit unsure of what else to say. As for my second reason for being here, the Hokage has requested the real Namikaze-sama to appear before her as soon as possible. She specifically stated he was not to send another clone this time. Understood, replied the clone, his tone hardening again. Tell her he will be there soon. Pig nodded before turning to leave, sensing he clone behind him disperse. Inside the house, the real Naruto and several clones were currently in his office reading over several scrolls concerning both the village laws and the Accursed Alliance contract. Over the last month he had been trying to find a loophole in either that would allow him to get out of the damned alliance without harming anyone, but so far he had come up with nothing. The original clan heads that had written the contract had been rather thorough when creating the terms of the agreement. Short of him killing himself and Mito, there was no way to avoid marrying Hinata that wouldn't destroy her family. He had been confused at first as to why the Hyuga giving him back the money would harm them so much. It wasn't really that much money originally. That's when he found the clause which detailed the amount of money to be returned being based on the percentage of money they had then in regards to what they had then. Basically, since his family had given them 90% of the money they needed to build their clan compound, and which they had also used to become financially stable in the village, they would need to return 90% of their current holdings to replace it. Based on what he had been able to discover from his clones, coming up with that much money would mean the clan would be forced to sell the majority of their land and liquidate all their business holdings. It was not an acceptable outcome, especially since it would just create animosity between his family and the Hyuga. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun. This is all my fault. This world just seemed so perfect when I found it. I wish I had picked another one, any other one. Looking over at the red and gold phoenix perched in the window, Naruto shook his head. It wasn't your fault, Momo. I wouldn't be surprised if this agreement had been in place back home as well. Hiyashi always did look at me like I was a bomb ready to explode, which is probably why he didn't mention anything to me before the war. If things hadn't gone so far south, I probably would have ended up marrying Hinata anyway, saving him from ever having to worry about his family's holdings. Just then he received the memories from his clone stationed at the gate and smirked. So, Tsunade finally figured out that I would keep sending clones until she requested me personally, did she? Well, can't keep the Hokage waiting, now can I? Try to remember. Naruto-kun, she didn't mean to hurt you. She was just looking out for the girls, whom she's known much longer than she has you. I know, Momo-chan, he admitted, standing up from his desk and making his way towards his bedroom to change into his new shinobi clothing. I just lost my cool when I heard what they were suggesting. I'll keep my temper this time. Just listen to her, Naruto-kun. Now, while you are off to talk to the old hag, I'm going to go play with the kids at the park. Have fun, Momo-chan. He called after her as the phoenix flew out the window. Reaching his bedroom, Naruto stripped out of the sleeping pants and t-shirt he was wearing before heading into the bathroom for a quick shower. Several minutes later he stepped back out into his bedroom and opened the dresser drawer where his clones had put his new gear and clothing. Jiraiya had applied the steel skin seal on him the day after the incident at the Hokage monument, and thanks to Momo he had adapted to it over the course of a week. His skin looked no different to the casual observer, but it was now constantly as hard as it normally was when he was channeling nature chakra. That, combined with the warmer temperature of this world, had encouraged him to get some new clothes. They were nowhere near as revealing as some of the other shinobi around the village wore, but they were drastically different from what he was used to. Pulling out a pair of black knee-length shorts, an orange-tinted steel mesh short sleeveless t-shirt, a black sleeveless flak jacket, and a pair of black canvas high-top athletic shoes, he began to dress. Once dressed, with his headband fastened securely around his head, Naruto started fastening on his weapons pouches and tucking various scrolls inside his vest pockets. He debated zipping up the vest, but it was too hot already today for that, so left it unzipped. Unlike the other mesh clothing his clones had found in the stores, this one was a tighter weave, meaning he didn't feel half when wearing it. All in all, he liked the new look even if there wasn't enough orange in it for his tastes. Well, better see what the hold hag wants, he murmured to himself before vanishing in a yellow flash. Reappearing outside the Hokage tower, Naruto was ignored by most of the people around him as they assumed he was just another clone. That was fine with Naruto considering he just was not in the mood to deal with people fawning over him thanks to his position as the head of two clans. Making his way up to Tsunade's office, Naruto noticed Hinata sitting behind the mission desk handing out assignments to several genin teams. The dark-haired beauty looked up at him, also assuming he was just a clone, and gave him a wistful smile before returning to her duties. Naruto was a bit confused by the look she gave him, but wrote it off as her feeling bad about being forced to marry him. Stepping up to the door to the Hokage's office, Naruto knocked once before the door opened and he stepped inside. You wanted to see me, Hokage-sama. Tsunade, looking a bit haggard, looked up at him with a sad smile. I'm glad to see the real you again after so long, Naruto-san. Naruto just nodded, accepting her words as just pleasant banter before issuing him an order. Thank you, Hokage-sama, but what can I do for you today? Sighing, not happy that Naruto seemed resistant to relaxing around her, a fact that surprised her considering she hadn't known him that long, Tsunade explained. No, I don't have a mission for you today, not a real one anyway. What I really wanted was just to talk to you. Not as the Hokage and one of her shinobi, but as two people that got off to a bad start and need to come to a better understanding of each other. Ah, I see, Naruto calmly replied. So, you tell me how sorry you are and I automatically forgive you, is that it? No, she instantly objected, though she felt her temper flaring for a moment. I don't expect you to just roll over and take it, not again. The fact that you think that's what I expect of you is bad enough, but that's not what I want at all. Reaching down and opening one of her desk drawers, Tsunade pulled out a bottle of sake and two dishes. Pouring a generous amount of sake in both, she offered one to Naruto with a gesture for him to take a seat. She was a bit surprised when he actually accepted both offers, pulling a chair over and then taking a seat as he accepted the sake. With another gesture she dismissed the Anbu hidden in the office, waiting for them to leave before she spoke. You know, I didn't want this job, she said after the last Anbu left the room. Mito had to nearly die in order to convince me to come back. I was out of the village during Orochimaru's attempted invasion. There was an outbreak of unusual sickness in Wave Country. No one could explain the cause, but people were dying at an alarming rate. Shizune and I were sent to investigate, but things were looking bad for the people there. We were so focused on figuring out the problem that we missed the rumors about an invasion back home. It was only when Jiraiya and Mito showed up that we became aware of the problem. Taking a sip of her sake, Tsunade looked thoughtful for a moment before she continued. In a way, it was a good thing we missed the invasion, seeing as how Orochimaru had his spies bomb the hospital right off the start. We lost a lot of healers and nurses that day, not to mention the bad position it left the village in. Orochimaru was dead. Itachi killed him when that old snake tried to give the kid a curse seal during the invasion, but the damage was done. Sarutobi was already dead, poisoned by that damned sword Orochimaru always carried around with him. The civilian council was trying to force Itachi and his mother to marry, wanting to force them to breed more, pure, Uchiha. It was a mess of unbelievable proportions. Sounds like a bad time for everyone, commented Naruto, speaking for the first time since taking his seat. Pouring herself some more sake, Naruto hadn't finished his yet. Tsunade nodded. It was. The clan council wanted me to become the next Hokage, leaving Wave to suffer their fate without me. I refused, my duty as a healer taking precedence over the needs of the village at that moment. It was only when Mito got sick that I figured out what was causing the deaths. One of Gato's ships, he was the bastard that had been trying to take over the country before Mito and her team stopped him, was leaking rare chemicals into the waters around Wave. Mixing in the waters around the ship, then being absorbed by the local fish. When the people of the village ate enough of the fish, they got sick. Tsunade finished her second dish of sake, pouring a third as she snorted. Mito always had a big appetite, so after eating enough fish in one sitting for 3 people, she got sick. As it was her first meal in the village, I examined her food, most of which she had thrown back up. I realized the chemicals were acting as a poison and managed to create a cure, along with instructing the local fishermen to drag Gato's ship out of the water and sealing away the chemicals. All the while Shizune were treating sick villagers and Mito. Sounds like you did the right thing then, but how did Mito getting sick convince you to become Hokage? It wasn't her getting sick that made me change my mind, stated Tsunade with a smile. It was what she said after the fact. As soon as she was back on her feet, Mito hugged me and said, "That's why you should be Hokage, you care about everyone, not just the villagers." I can see that, admitted Naruto, finally finishing his sake and refilling his saucer. So, you came back to the village and fired the old civilian council and the old advisors. Pretty much, agreed Tsunade with a devilish smile. Oh, I threatened the shits for a bit before I did, but in the end I got rid of them all. A few of them tried to threaten to leave the village, taking their little businesses with them if they did, but I pointed out to them that the Namikaze clan-owned businesses made theirs meaningless in the long run, so they shut up. Are my family holdings really that important to the village economy? Asked Naruto, already expecting her answer. Honestly, yes, she admitted with a wry grin. If you ever manage to get control of the businesses you own in Iwa and Kumo, you will represent the single most financially powerful person in all of the elemental nations. At this point, I'm not sure how you would pull that off, short of going to war with both countries, but anything is possible. I'll forego a war, Naruto said with a frown. Considering how long those businesses have been out of my family's hands, it may be a moot point to try and get them back. Do you know exactly what those businesses were? Both were mining companies, mostly copper in Iwa and iron ore in Kumo, Tsunade informed him. Last reports we had out of Iwa was that the copper was almost exhausted, but the mines in Kumo seemed to be doing fine. There is also a titanium mine in Uzu, but has been inactive since the village was destroyed. The Uzumaki clan had a secret method of extracting the raw ore from the ground without having to strip mine the land, but when they died no one knew how they did it. Without their knowledge of how to extract it in pure form, no one could afford to keep the mine open. I'll look into that, offered Naruto, wondering if there were any secret records kept in the Uzumaki vaults sealed under the ruins of the village. Being able to provide titanium alloys to our allies might make for a good economic boost for my family. Like you need it, laughed Tsunade, your 2 clans combined are the richest ones in the world, bar none. Yes, But I have plans for that wealth, and without more money coming in, that wealth won't last forever, countered Naruto. Oh, you've got plans to you? Asked Tsunade, curious as to what he had in mind. Care to share? Naruto thought about it a moment, then figured there was no harm in telling her a bit about what he had in mind. My Jiraiya believed that peace was possible, if we worked for it hard enough. I plan to see his dream come true by funding hospitals and schools across the elemental nations where everyone, civilian and shinobi alike, will be welcomed regardless of where they come from. A lofty goal, Naruto, admitted Tsunade with a smile. I won't lie, it will be a lot of work getting the other nations to accept something like that. Not just the elemental nations, but the other continents as well, clarified Naruto, watching as Tsunade's jaw dropped. I plan on using the money my family makes to improve the entire world, not just a part of it. I know there are other continents, some with greater or lesser levels of technology, so I will use my schools to spread that knowledge everywhere. Holy shit, kid, that's one hell of a goal to have, the Hokage admitted, draining her sixth saucer and refilling it again. You sure you're up for something like that? I've been a shinobi all my life, answered Naruto with a smirk. I've fought wars and I've taken lives. Now I want to do something that will help everyone, not just one village. I may not live to see the completion of my dream, but I will do my best to see it well on its way. Which is part of the reason I came here in person and didn't just send another clone. Oh, and why is that? I've decided to accept the Hyuga contract, taking Hinata as my wife, Naruto informed her, though Tsunade could tell he wasn't happy about it. I will also willingly enter into the CRA program, to ensure that Mito can be with the woman she loves. I detect a but coming, so spit it out, Tsunade ordered, setting her saucer aside and leaning forward to rest her chin on her intertwined hands. But I doubt I will ever take any other wives, stated Naruto, no emotion present in his voice as he spoke. I read about an old tradition, the use of a third party to carry a child when a woman could not carry a child of her own. The woman to be impregnated would be covered in a sheet, hidden from sight, as the man and his wife faced each other as he did what was needed. For all intents and purpose, the surrogate mother was a non-entity in the process, paid well for carrying the child, then given another large sum of money once she delivered the child. I will just use a variation of the technique. I know there are drugs that will cause me to have an erection whether I want or not, so I will use a sleeping pill to fall asleep. Hinata and Mito can then cover my body in a sheet and apply the needed drug to cause a physical reaction. I will be nothing more than a donor, never taking any gratification from the act, nor participating in it as anything other than a living toy. This can be repeated as often as needed until Hinata is pregnant. After that the Hyuga family will be safe and I will not have been forced to rape an unwilling woman. Once the child is born I will sign over all parental rights to Mito and step aside to let them raise it as their own. At that point I can fade into the background, the child will inherit my family name and fortune, and none of them need ever see me again. Tsunade was shocked by the cold logic of his plan. He was so convinced that he would never be loved by either young woman that he was going to sacrifice his own happiness for them. Not only that, he would be reducing himself to little better than a strap-on for the two girls to use while he wouldn't even be conscious. The fact he would then never seek them out again, nor his child, left Tsunade cursing Makoto and Hiashi for causing this mess by bringing up the contract or the CRA. Hell, Naruto wasn't even going to attempt to find any other women to marry, leaving himself alone for the rest of his life. It was just too horrible a fate for someone with such heart that he wanted to help the world, but didn't seem to be able to help himself. Kami, moaned Tsunade, burying her face in her hands. This isn't what I wanted, Naruto. I know we started off a little rocky, but I hope today we could get past that and find a way for everyone to be happy. I will be happy, countered Naruto, though the look in his eyes clearly stated he was lying. I'll have my dreams to keep me occupied. But who will love you? I've finally accepted that no matter where I go, love is not in the cards for me, stated an emotionless Naruto. I just have to accept that it is my fate to be alone. The best I can hope for is that when I finally die, someone will be there to ensure I receive a proper burial, or at least destroy my body before someone can desecrate it. Lifting her face from her hands, tears pouring from her eyes, Tsunade hated the look of cold acceptance in Naruto's eyes. No, don't think that way, Naruto. We can find another way without you needing to give up so much. There is no other way, argued Naruto with a sad smile. I've read that contract several times and it's ironclad. I can't even take a mistress, nor can Hinata, without activating the infidelity clauses that would dissolve the alliance. Old bastards that wrote it never thought about who might cheat, just that if either of them did the Hyuga would still have to give everything up. Me, I just have to hand back an old dagger, but the Hyuga, they would be ruined. So, you tell me, what other options do I have? Standing and bowing to Tsunade, Naruto left the office without a further word. Tsunade just sat there, watching him go, with tears pouring down her face. This wasn't how things were supposed to turn out. Talking with Naruto was supposed to give her an idea of how to make the young man happy, not listen to him basically say he had given up on anyone ever caring about him. She might not have known him for long, but Jiraiya raved to everyone about what a good man Naruto was, and she had listened to every one of those stories when they were related to her by her Anbu. Even the interaction people had with Naruto's clones had painted the young blonde as a good man. Sure, the clones might not talk much, but they helped so many people without ever asking for anything in return. Just this morning she got a report of several of the clones helping put out a fire in a house, saving everyone inside even after her Anbu guards had given up the attempt. They might just be clones, but they reflected who Naruto was, and it was clear that he was a man worthy of respect and love, but now he had given up on that. He's such a martyr sometimes. Spinning around in on her chair, Tsunade came face to face with a magnificent red and gold bird sitting on her windowsill. I take it you are Momo. Yep. Jiraiya told me that you already knew about me, so no need hiding the fact. The most powerful Biju in the world playing with children and healing scraped knees, laughed Tsunade as she admired the phoenix before her. I like kids. They're still innocent, seeing all the wonder in the world that we lost sight of as we got older. Just so you know, Naruto-kun plays with the kids as well. He just uses a powerful henge to make it look like he's one of them. That surprised Tsunade as her Anbu assured her that Naruto hadn't left his house in weeks. Then again, he did know his father's techniques, so he was probably flashing in and out of his house when no one was watching. The part of her mind that was Hokage wanted to be angry that he was slipping past her security, but the rest of her had to admit the kid had some peace and quiet due him. I won't tell anyone, she promised, getting a nod from the phoenix. I'm worried about him though. What he has planned about the schools and hospitals is really amazing, but the rest of it crushes my heart. Naruto-kun tends to go to extremes when he feels strongly about something. In this case he can't even see that Hinata and Mito might be able to have genuine feelings for him. He can't even see that others might as well. No, it's not that he can't, he just won't. He's been hurt so many times in the past, now he just expects it to happen again, so why bother trying anymore? I've watched the girls, they are a mess, as are Anko and Yugao, because they all feel guilty about this situation. Naruto won't accept that they might care about him, seeing any caring as nothing but an act to make him happy, when in reality they really do care about him. In time, they might all fall in love with him, but he can't bring himself to see it. Tsunade nodded. She had spoken with all four young women and they each had some degree of fondness for the young blonde. I don't know how to make him see it, not if he is determined not to. You can't make him do anything, at least not in his personal life. However, you could force him to do something as his Hokage, say an extended mission that just happens to include the young ladies in Quesadin. That has possibilities, admitted Tsunade, though she wasn't completely convinced it would help. Would that really solve anything though? seeing as how he's convinced himself that any genuine feelings they might develop for him are nothing but sugar-coated words to keep him happy. Several days after his conversation with Tsunade in her office, Naruto was preparing for his new mission. Based on their conversation, Tsunade had decided to send Naruto and a team to the land of whirlpools to investigate the ruins. On the surface it was a fact-finding mission, but the reality was she wanted them to see if Naruto could find anything about reopening the titanium mines there. Considering the distance involved, Naruto would have to go personally rather than sending clones of himself. That is why he was currently sealing about a year's worth of instant ramen in a storage seal. The mission was a B-ranked operation, mostly because of the time frame of several weeks, but there could be a chance of upgrading it if there were any Rouge shinobi present. Given what he knew of the island the old village was located on and the fact it was so isolated, he highly doubted that would be a factor. However, better safe than sorry, so he was also sealing a vast amount of weapons and supplies in other scrolls. It was unlikely that he would find anything or anyone on the island that could really threaten him, but he wasn't going to take any chances. Jiraiya, before moving back in with his wife the day after Naruto spoke with her, had offered to come along, but Naruto declined. He already knew that Anko and Yugao were coming along, but had not been informed who his other two teammates would be. Not knowing how anyone else would pack, he made sure he had extras of everything, as it was better to not need it than to need it and not have it. With that in mind, he finished sealing the last of his scrolls away in a simple backpack before he stepped outside his house and activated the blood seals to prevent anyone from sneaking inside while he was gone. Assured his house was secured, he walked towards the village's main gates to meet up with his team and start the mission. A few minutes later he was silently cursing under his breath as he saw who his other two teammates would be. It was bad enough having Anko and Yugao along, their constant apologies to him were getting on his nerves, but now he had his other two headaches to deal with. Dressed in their decidedly skimpy mission clothes, Hinata and Mito were standing with Anko and Yugao at the gate waiting for him. Obviously the old hag was trying to get him to form some type of attachment to the young women, but he wasn't going to fall for that. No, Naruto would not form bonds with these women, feeling that anything they might do to gain his affection would just be an act. That wasn't what he wanted, not by a long shot. Fine, he grunted as he approached the waiting women, you're my team for this mission. Let's just keep this professional and we'll all be fine. I will try to limit the time I am around you, to prevent my presence from causing any of you discomfort. In return I ask that you respect my privacy. Hinata-san, I'm sure you are aware that I signed the paperwork to finalize our marriage when we return, so you needn't worry about your family being harmed by my rejection of the contract. Mito-san, I have also signed the paperwork to enroll in the CRA and will be taking you as a wife in name only. I have already found a method that will allow you to have a child, Hinata, that will involve only token participation on my part, allowing you and Mito to have a child that you can raise together. All of that will be explained after we return and finalize the marriages. All four women were looking shocked at how coldly Naruto was acting towards them. Sure, they had expected him to be less than happy about the situation, but had hoped they could get him to cheer up. Mito had planned on telling him that she didn't just want to be a token wife, but to give a relationship between them a try. Hinata was of the same mind, though she was still a little nervous about the thought of having with a man, even if it was Naruto. As for Anko and Yugao, they were confused about what they felt. Both were attracted to Naruto, but both knew it would be a hard path that led to his heart, given his belief that any affection they showed him would just be because they were ordered to act that way towards him, which they hadn't been. Not knowing what to say, unsure if there was any right thing to say under the circumstances, all four women followed Naruto as he took to the trees outside the village and made his way towards the coast. It was a silent journey, along with being an exhausting one for the four of them. Mito was proud of her huge reserves of stamina, but Naruto made her look like a fresh out of the academy genin. After an hour of breakneck speeds, the four women were requesting a rest stop, having covered in an hour what normally took 4 hours. Even Anko and Yugao were at their limit, even with their Anbu training. It wasn't the distance they had covered, they were used to running much farther without stopping, but not at the pace Naruto set. It was just crazy how fast he could move and they weren't capable of keeping up with him without causing themselves injury. We've got to rest, then slow down for the rest of the trip, Naruto-san, Yugao finally said when they stopped to rest. We're not used to the pace you set. If you keep this up, one of us is going to get injured. Too late, groaned Anko, nursing several scrapes and cuts from running into branches. I feel like I just got dragged across a cheese grater. I see, grunted Naruto, creating 4 clones that picked up the girls before Naruto and they took to the trees again. The 4 women tried to object to being carried like civilians through the trees, but each secretly enjoyed the feeling of being held in Naruto's arms. If he noticed that fact, Naruto didn't show it. In that fashion they ran for another 6 hours, shocking his 4 teammates that Naruto was capable of such a feat. The fact that he had sped up once he didn't have to hold back meant they covered a day's worth of distance in just those 6 hours, reaching the small fishing village where they would hire a boat to take them to the land of whirlpools before noon. Naruto had just managed to cut their travel time in half, more than that really if you considered rest stops. Not to mention he barely looked tired when they arrived at the dock and he had his clones set the girls down before dispersing. I'll hire us a boat to take us to the edge of the whirlpool defenses, Naruto informed them before he headed off to the office next to the largest dock. Kami's holy panties! Exclaimed Anko, as she looked around at the others. Did he really just cover the distance between Konoha and here in 7 hours? Carrying us as he did it. The proof is right in front of us, replied Hinata, stretching her legs after 6 hours of being carried. I don't know anyone that could do that, not even Itachi, and he's considered one of the fastest jonin in the village. He's not even tired, or he's damned good at hiding it, added Yugao as she helped Anko treat a few scraps that hadn't healed yet. I've had to carry comrades after they got injured on missions, but never for that long or that fast. He's a machine. No, Mito said, watching Naruto in the distance hiring them a boat. He's not a machine. He's just a man with a lot of power at his disposal. If he was a machine he would have just forced us to keep up with him, but instead he sacrificed his own body to make sure we were uninjured. I watched his eyes when you said you were hurt, Anko. Till then he was just going to let us rest, but once you said you had gotten hurt, that's when he stepped in to help us. He was protecting us, even if it meant he had to suffer. Damn, I didn't know he was going to do something like that, or I wouldn't have said anything, protested Anko, looking ashamed of herself now. I was just teasing him, for Kami's sake. Looking at Anko, Hinata shook her head sadly. Naruto-kun does not seem to see that, Anko-san. He only sees someone hurt and then he acts. We all need to be careful around him right now, because I'm afraid of what he would do if we were in real danger. The other 3 girls looked nervous at hearing that, but nodded in agreement as Naruto walked back over to them, saying, we got lucky. The old man over there says all his boats are out, but there's a fisherman going out for some night fishing that will be passing right past where we need to get off. Says we would be able to hitch a ride, if we help load his nets. I already sent some clones that way, so we need to get over there. Without saying another word, Naruto turned and headed towards where their ride was waiting. The girls were more than a little saddened by the fact Naruto seemed to feel he couldn't talk to them, but couldn't say they were all that surprised by it. In short order Naruto had the nets loaded, actually laughing and joking with the boat's captain as they set sail, something that depressed the girls even more. The fact that Naruto could be so happy and carefree around others, but not them, had all of them determined to break through his emotional barriers. Been a long time since I've seen an Uzumaki around these parts, the old captain said to Naruto as they cleared the dock. How did you know I'm an Uzumaki? Asked Naruto, a little concerned that the old man might be more than he seemed. He needn't have worried, seeing as how the old man turned a gobsmacked face to him, saying, you're an Uzumaki, too. Damn. Never seen a blonde Uzumaki before. No, I recognized your girlfriend over there. Looks just like my dear Kasumi, Kami rest her soul. You were married to an Uzumaki, sir. The old man nodded, looking happy at the memory. Met my Kasumi when I was 17 and out on my first solo fishing trip. Like a damn fool, I ignored my father's warnings and steered too close to the whirlpools. Before I knew it, my boat was going down and I was sure I was a goner. I woke up the next day looking up at the most beautiful girl I had ever seen, Kasumi. She found my damn near dead body floating in the water near the shore and took me home to heal me up. Couldn't get rid of me after that, and we got married a year later. We lived happy, working this very boat together for 5 years, least till them damn cowards attacked the island. What happened, sir? Asked Mito, having overheard the story. With misty eyes, the old man smiled at her before answering. I was doing a favor for Kasumi's uncle, running his little granddaughter and her guards to the mainland. Kasumi had stayed with her family, expecting our first little one. I had dropped off my passengers, still remember that little lass smiling up at me as I said goodbye, and was getting ready to sail back to the island when I saw the first of the ships sail in. Must have been 100 of them, if not more, cutting off all access to the island. We weren't stupid, we knew what was gonna happen with that many ships, and we were right. When I finally got back to the island a month later, weren't no trace of any living Uzumaki anymore. Oh, I found my Kasumi, but that just meant I got to lay her to rest the way she wanted. I laid a lot of Uzumaki to rest over the next 2 weeks, though I couldn't tell you anymore how many it was. Ain't stepped foot back on that island since, don't imagine I will as long as I'm alive. Won't tell anyone how to get past the whirlpools, so when my time comes I've asked for my ashes to be spread in the water near them, let a part of me rest near Kasumi at least. When the time comes, tell them to find me, old man, Naruto said, looking at the old man with a sad smile. I'll make sure you get tucked in next to your wife, believe it. With a look of surprise on his face, the old man bowed to Naruto, saying, thank you, son. It does my heart good to know I'll be with her again someday. It didn't take long for them to reach the whirlpools, which the old man navigated around as if they weren't even there, meaning Naruto and the girls got dropped off in the shallows. With a wave of his hand, the old man turned his boat around and made his way out to sea, leaving a thoughtful group behind him. It had been one of his worries that they would run across the remains of the long-dead Uzumaki, but now he knew someone had cared enough to lay them to rest. In fact, as they left the beach they could already see a large area of land that seemed to be nothing but burial markers. Naruto turned to look at them, leading the women silently behind him. There were hundreds of the markers, each a slab of stone that had a name and date carved on it. At first it was confusing, but then Hinata pointed out it must be their first name and the day they were laid to rest, as the dates covered several weeks. It was surprising to realize that old man had known the entire clan by name, but more surprising to see how much time and effort he had put into laying the Uzumaki clan to rest. At the very center of the markers, with space enough beside it for another grave someday, stood a white stone marker. It was the only marker with 2 names on it, and a short message. Kasumi Sasaki and Baby Sasaki, Mito read, kneeling down to clean the stone off. I'll love you both forever. I don't care what you do, or where you go in life, Naruto Uzumaki, you will keep that promise, commanded Hinata, tears running from her eyes as she picked weeds from around the stone. I will, whispered Naruto, wiping tears from his own eyes. He deserves that much after what he did for our family. Naruto may not have noticed that he included the girls when he said, our family, but they sure did. It gave them all a little glimmer of hope as they walked out of the graveyard and headed towards the ruins of Uzushiogakure, the shinobi village on the island that had also been the main population center. Climbing up through the trees to the top of a stretch of tall hills, all 5 visitors were surprised by the sight below them. Naruto had read about the village in Jiraiya's notebooks, but that was nothing compared to what he was seeing below him. It was both amazing and heartbreaking. Cammy wept, muttered Yugao, falling to her knees as she looked at the village below her. The entire valley below them was covered in the ruins of numerous tall buildings, most of which were anywhere from 6 to 20 stories tall. Naruto had seen similar building in AIM, but they were different, harder and crueler looking. These buildings had been covered in artwork, seals, and geometric patterns that made them look majestic. Now they just looked sad, at least to Naruto. Cutting down the middle of the valley was a river that in the light of the setting sun looked as if it was filled with blood. It was just too much to look at. Let's set up camp here, he finally said, turning away from the ruins and pulling off his backpack. The girls had rather hoped Naruto would forget about his promise to leave them once camp was set up, but he didn't. No sooner was the last of the tents assembled before he vanished, leaving not a trace of his location behind. It wasn't until dawn and after they had packed their tents back away that they saw him again. Sitting on the hilltop and staring at the ruins below. He didn't even say good morning, instead he just stood up and made his way down into the ruins. This would be the pattern for the next week. Naruto spoke as little as possible, barely saying a word unless it was absolutely required. The girls all tried to get him to speak to them, but it was like trying to catch smoke in your hands, just never as easy as you thought it should be. Making it worse was Naruto's resumed usage of shadow clones to cover more territory. You could just never be sure if you were talking to the real him or another of his clones, so the accepted practice was to act like the clones were Naruto and just keep talking. Whether or not Naruto cared was debatable, though Mito did find extra towels on his sleeping bag when she mentioned she hadn't brought any with her. It wasn't until the 10th day after leaving Konoha that things changed. Naruto had headed off towards the western end of the valley to examine some of the smaller buildings there. The girls had split into two teams, with Anko and Hinata taking the northeast side of the valley while Mito and Yugao took the southeast. All 5 of them had headsets, not that Naruto usually turned his on except at the top of the hour to check in before turning it off again. Part of this was his insistence that it would spare them his company, and part was because he could only take so much girl talk before he wanted to pull his hair out. So, it was a bit of a shock when he turned his radio on and heard Mito calling his name over and over again. "Please, don't turn your radio off before you hear this, Naruto," she was saying, sounding panicked. "Please, please, please, listen to me before you turn your radio off." "What's wrong, Mito?" he asked, cutting into her rambling. "Thank Cammy," shouted the girl. "We lost contact with Hinata and Anko right after your last check-in. One moment they were saying they had just found a large opening, then they were gone. We haven't been able to reach them since and we can't find any trace of them. Please, I know you hate us, but we need your help. Please, Naruto, help me find Hinata. I'm on my way," he shouted, creating a virtual army of clones to follow behind him as he surfaced of the river to save time. It took him only a few minutes to reach Mito and Yugao's location, at which point the now sobbing young redhead glomped him, burying her face in his chest. While Naruto, looking rather surprised by Mio's proximity, tried to calm the redhead down, Yugao was giving him the details. Approximately an hour before they had just heard Naruto give his standard, "I'm alive and well," announcement before signing off. After that, Hinata had discovered a large opening to the north of their location and announced that she and Anko were going to check it out. That was the last they heard from either Hinata or Anko, and all attempts to find them had been fruitless. "You weren't using any tracking markers?" "No, we were," answered Yugao. "We were using Type C3 markers while Anko and Hinata were using Type B2, so we could tell the difference if we crossed paths by accident." Looking confused, Naruto admitted, "I don't know those, are they new?" Kneeling down, Anko made 2 different types of marks in the dirt, one looked like a cat's paw with and the other like a bird's claw. "Oh, I recognize those. In my world we called them delta and epsilon type markers." "Which is which?" I forget things weren't exactly the same where you came from, apologized Yugao. They were using the bird's claw markings. Got it, Naruto said, sending his clones off to examine the area Hinata and Anko had disappeared in. Then lifting Mito's chin with his hand, Naruto smiled at the crying girl. I don't hate you, Mito. I don't have it in me to hate anyone, not really. I'm just trying to not come between you what you and Hinata have, okay? No, it's not okay, Naruto-kun, whined the girl, burying her face in his chest again and hugging him tightly. You're part of our family. How can we be happy if you aren't there with us? We want you to be with us, don't you get it? I wish I could believe that, he whispered, more to himself than to Mito, but she heard it anyway. I will find a way to make you believe it, Naruto-kun, that's a promise, swore the girl, hugging him even tighter, not seeing the sad look on his face. It took about 20 minutes for the clones to find the general area the two girls had vanished from. Making their way to the location, the three shinobi found a large circular building that was partially buried in the rubble of two other buildings. At first you would think the domed roof was just a hill that had been paved over, at least until you noticed the writing around the outer rim of the dome. Clearing the accumulated debris of several decades, Naruto finally read what was written there. Hall of Justice, he read, wondering what that could have meant. He looked up at Mito and Yugao. A courthouse or something like that? Possibly, agreed Yugao, looking around for an entrance. Over there, looks like an opening. Making their way over, the three of them found a set of large stone doors. The doors were probably 15 feet tall by 10 wide, each. From the look of the dirt around the bottom of them, they had been forced open recently, meaning this was most likely where Hinata and Anko had disappeared. Using a small burst of chakra, Naruto pried the doors open, noticing in the process that they were covered in numerous seals and a short message. Justice is blind. Justice fails in the face of a lie. Truth shall set you free, he read out loud as he opened the doors enough for them to enter. Not thinking anything more of it, the three of them stepped inside. However, the moment they stepped inside the remarkably intact building, the doors slammed closed behind them. To make a bad situation worse, seals started glowing all around them and they all suddenly found they were unable to mold chakra. For the girls it wasn't much of an issue, but for Naruto it was like his body was suddenly made of lead. He crashed to the ground, for the first time remembering that Momo had long ago told him gravity was slightly higher in this world. I must have been channeling a small amount of chakra to my muscles to make up the difference, he explained to the two concerned women when they asked what was wrong. Gravity is stronger here than in my world. I probably did it without even thinking. Will you be okay? Asked Mito, helping him to his feet. Sure, it's just like training back home, I'll deal with it and overcome it in time, he assured her with a smile. For now, we've got to find Hinata and Anko. Unable to use chakra, they could not unseal any of the torches Naruto had sealed away, but Yugao adapted by taking off her jacket and tearing it into strips. Naruto was a bit flustered to see her in just her see-through mesh undershirt, but ignored it as best he could as he watched her strike a kunai against the stone of the door to create sparks. It took her a few tries, but she managed to catch a strip of cloth on fire, which she then picked up with the kunai to use as a makeshift torch. The cloth wouldn't last long, but they hoped it would be long enough to find their missing teammates. They were on their fifth strip of cloth when they finally entered a large open room at the center of the building. Much to their relief, especially Mito, Hinata and Anko were sitting in the middle of the room around a glowing white pillar. They enjoyed a rather happy reunion, before getting down to business. Over the course of the last hour, almost 2 hours now, Hinata and Anko had been looking for a way out. So far they had come up empty as it seemed there was only one way in or out of the building, through the large stone doors. Without their chakra they had been unable to open the massive doors, so had fallen back to the one light source in the whole place. We were afraid, admitted Anko, looking a bit ashamed at herself for saying it. I honestly thought we might die in here if you didn't find us. Now that you are here though, I'm afraid we all might die. I won't let that happen, even if I'm also afraid, Naruto said, looking surprised that he had admitted he was afraid. I didn't mean to say that, but couldn't stop myself. It's this place, Hinata explained, looking around the faintly illuminated room. We noticed it right away. You can't lie in this building, not even to yourself. Remembering the seals they had seen activate when they entered, Naruto wondered if that was the true meaning of the writing on the door. I think the seals we activated are the cause, though they were way beyond anything I've ever seen before. But the doors said truth would set us free, Mito said, looking confused. If all we can speak is the truth in here, should we be free to leave? Naruto thought about that, giving up and sitting down on the floor, his legs no longer able to hold himself up. I hate being weak. It reminds me of when I was a little kid and people used to beat me. Crap, I didn't mean to tell you that. I never wanted any of you to know I used to get beaten when I was a kid. Hinata was shocked to hear that Naruto had been beaten as a child, but she also noticed that the glowing pillar had gotten brighter when he told them that. Why were you beaten, Naruto-kun? Looking like he was fighting himself, Naruto tried not to answer, but in the end he had no choice. I never knew when I was little. It was only after I graduated from the academy that I found out it was because my father sealed the QB inside me. Oh shit! Exclaimed everyone, even Hinata, as she watched the pillar grow a little brighter. Fox is out of the bag now, groaned Naruto, looking down at the floor, worried that the girls would hate him now. My father was going to seal it in me until my mom made him seal it in her, stated Mito, stepping over and sitting next to Naruto. Sure, I didn't know that until Granny told me, but I've thought about what my life could have been like when I was little if Dad had won that argument. We don't care if you've got a demon sealed inside you, Naruto-kun, Anko said as she sat on Naruto's other side. Hell, my old sensei raped me as he was branding one of his curse seals on my neck, so I know all about having a shitty life. You never told us he raped you, Anko, shouted Yugao, looking worried for her friend. You said you didn't remember anything from before you got the seal. I lied, answered Anko. Well, sort of lied. I don't remember anything from before he branded me, but I remember him suddenly on top of me laughing like a madman as he pulled away from my neck, all the while he was thrusting into me as I screamed. Maybe I was willing before he branded me, but I wasn't after he did. All I could remember was leaving the village with my kind and caring sensei, then suddenly I was in a shitty cave as he was holding me down and forcing himself on me. He finished, laughing the whole time, then climbed off me, pulling up his pants and telling me what a disappointment I was. He walked out after that, never looking back. The last memory I have before being found by a team of Anbu was of him laughing as I passed out. I never told anyone that before. Hinata, torn between comforting Anko and watching the pillar, finally voiced her theory. I think the pillar here represents the amount of truth we need to speak before we are free. It has gotten brighter each time we've spoken an important truth. She paused for a moment, then summoning up her courage she looked around the group. I love Mito, but I think I could fall in love with Naruto as well. I've been so torn up about it since I met him that I didn't know what to do. I even debated killing myself to keep him from feeling like he was being forced into marrying me. I didn't because I couldn't imagine leaving Mito and I didn't want to make Naruto feel like he caused my death. Suddenly blushing like mad, Hinata suddenly blurted out, that and I keep dreaming about what it would be like to have with the both of them at the same time. Wow, drawled Yugao. That would be rather hot, especially since Naruto is hung like a horse. I hope I can join in sometime. Me too, admitted Anko, blushing as she said it. Naruto treated me nicer than anyone normally does in the village when I'm not wearing my Anbu mask. I've kind of had a crush on him ever since. Me too, admitted the other three girls. I was attracted to him the moment I saw him eating ramen with Itachi, Mito said, blushing. I know he's supposed to be my cousin, or brother, something like that, but I don't really care about that so much as I just want to see if we can make a relationship work between us. That and I really like how it feels when he holds me in his arms. Since my boyfriend Hyatt died during Orochimaru's invasion, I haven't really thought about any other men, whispered Yugao. The night we stayed at Naruto's house, when he was asleep and I stared at his body while undressing him, he pulled me into his arms at some point and I cried. It wasn't because I was sad, but because I felt safe again for the first time since Hyatt died. I think I started to fall in love with you that night, Naruto-kun. I felt so bad for you when we found out about the whole mess with the alliance contract and the CRA, but secretly I wanted to be one of your wives. I wanted to wake up feeling that safe every morning. Naruto, who had been silent since the girls started their confessions, was trying to absorb what he was hearing. His head said not to believe what they were saying, even if he knew it was the truth thanks to the seals in the building, but his heart wanted to believe them. Still, they could not make an honest declaration unless he told them the whole truth about himself. Mustering up the courage to speak, he looked around at the girls now sitting near him and sighed. This would be the make or break moment for any hope of a relationship he might have with any or all of them. I no longer contain the Kyuubi, he finally said, looking sad as he spoke. His name was really Kurama and he was probably the best friend I ever had, even if he was a pain in the when I was younger. The only way to win the war was to seal a creature called the Jubi inside myself. Things didn't go as planned though, and I ended up combining the Jubi with bits and pieces of chakra from the other 8 Biju, my own chakra, and a lot of nature chakra. It changed the Jubi into the Junabi, the 12-tailed phoenix, or Momo as she calls herself. That's why I had to leave my world. I had too much chakra for my world to support, so I came here. That's the bird that's been flying all over the village, playing with the kids and healing them, the most powerful Biju in existence. Exclaimed Anko, smirking as she did. Not only that, but the most powerful creature is a girl. Yeah, girls rock. You so didn't say that, groaned Yugao, palming her face. Granted, I agree completely, but still. You don't hate me because I didn't tell you about Momo? Asked Naruto, still a bit worried. Not at all, Hinata said with a grin. I watched her playing peek-a-boo with a toddler in the park one day, it was the cutest thing I've ever seen. Can we meet her? I can't talk to her right now, no chakra, explained Naruto, starting to feel like things might be looking up. I'll introduce you all when we get out of here. That is so cool, Mito said as she snuggled up to Naruto's side, pulling one of his arms around her.